29th of January, and the number of the day is no number. Nothing, nil, nada, nix, because the Reserve Bank of South Africa has decided to leave interest rates unchanged. So there is absolutely no change to those main numbers. 6.75%, that is the repo rate. That is a benchmark rate that the Reserve Bank lends to commercial banks. If you go and take out a bond, or if you go and take out some form of credit, then there is the prime interest rate, much higher, 10.25% at the moment, also unchanged. And this is something of a pause in the interest rate cutting party. That has really been wonderful for South African consumers. Since September 2024, we've seen a series of rate cuts. So you should, if you're in debt, be paying less on that debt, hopefully doing something wonderful with all the savings. Let me bring in our pop-up guest today, Mpho Molopiane, who is the chief economist of Alexander Forbes. Thank you so much. And you called it. You called it, even though it is a bit of a pause in the party. Do you agree?
It is. And can I just say that I like your classification of the interest rate easing cycle we've had so far, that it's been a party. So yeah. I really like that.
We need some crackers. And
yeah, we need to refill the drinks now and refill the snacks and wait for the next move. But yes, the SARB decided to keep interest rates unchanged today. And, the major reasons really being that they want to observe the cuts that they've implemented so far since the start of the easing cycle. They're also worried about that services inflation, which is still around 4%. And, but all the underlying indicators do suggest that there's still room for further cuts. So the party will continue.
In March.
We hope.
Can we pour the drinks for March?
Already, I think we should wait.
And see what happens between now and March. We don't know what US President Donald Trump is going to do between now and March, right?
No.
So you mentioned services inflation. So essentially, the Reserve Bank will cut interest rates unless it's worried about inflation. So there's this little worry that you have mentioned. Services inflation, I've heard it been called administered inflation, right? Administered prices. This is what we pay for electricity and our municipal bills, our water, and Eskom. Eskom is the fly in the
sticking point
in the Chardonnay at our party, because the Reserve Bank is worried about electricity prices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the governor was very specific in mentioning that and highlighting that, which is something that, when we were assessing the potential of the SARB moving to a low inflation target, it was one of the things that continued to come up to say that one of the key hindrances is likely to be electricity prices, because they, always rise at a level higher than your headline inflation. And unfortunately for most South Africans as well, is the looming additional hike from NERSA, right? Because there has been miscalculations and they need to make good on Eskom on that. So
what they're going to say is, sorry, the last electricity price hike was pretty bad, but we actually underestimated and it should have been higher. So we're going to hit you again now, right? Yeah. So is this where government has to come to the party? This is out of our hands as South Africans.
As South Africans, yes, it is out of our hands. But I also think that there isn't consensus within major stakeholders in terms of how to deal with Eskom, right? So firstly, there has been issues raised around, there's mismanagement, there are inefficiencies at Eskom, electricity tariffs should not be as high. But, equally so, you actually do have another body of research that argues that, well, South Africa, the electricity tariffs are actually not reflective of the cost base, right? And they argue that electricity tariffs should be even higher. So that disagreement and both school of thoughts, those discussion continues to rage, right? But the other issue as well is, as South Africans, we also need to be aware of what this actually means. Government can decide, they can make an announcement to say, okay, no, electricity tariffs, they'll only increase by 3% in line with the targeted inflation. But that will have an impact on Eskom's finances. And what that means is that government will then have to step in. National Treasury will have to step in. And we know what happens when National Treasury steps in. They increase taxes. So either way, we are paying for it.
And we could just say, let's not pay, but we don't want a situation in the future where we don't have electricity again. And government and Eskom have to think about the future. Before we wrap up, something else came up today. The risks around the uncertainty in this world. And there are risks of a market correction. The Reserve Bank governor said the AI bubble. What if it's all too good to be true and markets come down? The Rand has been doing incredibly well, but that's based on people losing faith in the dollar. Are you worried? And I'd love to know, are you worried about a potential crash? I've heard, and I don't know if this is complete hype, potentially a depression, because the whole world could be affected if US markets do come crashing down.
So the major concern with AI, right, is it is a risk. There is a lot of optimism and a lot of hype around AI. And we haven't necessarily seen the productivity gains from that, right? So, there's this hype around, okay, this thing is going to improve our productivity, it's going to improve our lives. But if you think about the scaling yourself up actually to be efficiently able to realize those productivity gains, there's still a little bit of learning curve.
It goes beyond ChatGPT helping
exactly,
you.
Right. So it's still a bit of long way. The major concern is that if that hype, if that optimism, those expectations are not met, then there will be a reevaluation in terms of those expectations. And if we see that reevaluation, market returns, we could see a re-rating, we could see a correction in the market. The major problem this time around is that you have the US economy, which is running hot, but most of that consumption has also been driven by household consumption, which has been also mainly been driven by your high income earners who have realized net wealth gains because they hold equity stocks. So you see that it's not only the risk that the market will correct, but that there could be a loop and feed through into the broader economy. So actually the impact could be a double-sided sword, essentially, because you'll have a correction.
Double whammy,
Yes, exactly. You have a correction in the stock market, but the economy is also going to be affected at the same time. And hence the concern that if we do get an AI bubble busting, it will have a major impact.
So the gold price has also been incredible, and that's been amazing for our miners who are getting more for the gold. Do we see that as something we can rely on in future, or is the gold price to you a potential alarm bell, in fact?
I mean, it also, I think it shows that, market participants are very much aware of risks, right? That there is potential risk in the market.
They're thinking about what we're talking about.
Yeah, we, maybe had a good rally. If we do see this dollar debasement, what does that actually mean for the, holdings in the stock market, the so-called fiat money? And what are they doing? They're hedging that risk with gold. And you see, for me, the rise in gold prices, I look at it in that lens, is that it's a mechanism to hedge the current risk in the market. The other concern as well is, normally in this environment, when you're concerned about risk or a correction in the equity market, you'd pack your money in bonds. But overseas investors are also worried about bond yields, particularly in those countries, because of debt service cost. So, you can't really pack your money in bonds. Your next best option becomes precious metals.
All right, so investors are hedging their bets. The Reserve Bank hedging its bets for now. Not quite certain what's going to happen with inflation, and saying interest rates are going nowhere. They're staying unchanged. That is the number of the day.